If you're not confident in your strategy, you cannot make better, faster decisions. If you can't make better, faster decisions on the direction you're going, you're not going to get there. The simple thing is to go get a coach, right? The coach didn't have the system or whatnot, but the coach was the thing that helped me avoid many doom loops.
So welcome to Escape the CEO Doom Loop, where we talk with rural leaders about the challenge of building great companies without losing your clarity, energy, or sanity. I'm John Ninkovich, joined by my co-host, Glen Dall.
Thanks, John. So today we're joined by someone John and I both know, respect, and are good friends. She's also the founder of the Metronomics and someone John and I are in a CEO roundtable with. She's one of the architects behind this strategic system, or the architect that's used by leadership teams around the world, as well as a software system, Metronome, that backs it up and powers it. Scaled and exited 2 fintech companies. She's led teams through hypergrowth and high-stakes deals and built the framework she wished she had as a CEO. So Shannon, thank you for being here and welcome to our podcast.
Yeah, thank you. I'm super excited. It is going to be a fun podcast. We will have a good discussion, even though it's early in the day for me to have anything other than water in my glass.
Awesome. Let's go. So Shannon, you've built companies, you built teams, and now you're helping build systems to help businesses and coaches and help them scale. That shift from doing to designing is what this podcast is all about. To kick us off, can you give our listeners a quick snapshot, your background, the companies you've led, and how that journey led you to create Metronomics?
The journey always begins when you decide to, found a company. There's lots of probably listeners going, yep, the journey began there. When we found a company, we build a company, we're trying to grow a company. And it puts together a few things. One, of course, strategy. Everyone learns that in business school. Yes, we have to have an execution, way to get it done. We need cash. But at the end of the day, we need a great team. And so my journey started, trying to put all those things together, getting stuck along the way. And part of that stuck was probably my greatest gift in building my first company. My first company was global internet payment service provider. And we were a platform out there. We think of internet payments today, like, of course there's internet payments, but back in the, mid to late 90s, that wasn't a thing. So that was my first company, and we grew. We got venture backed. We grew quickly. We went from 0 to 100 people in less than a year. And that's why I go people, because, we need structure, we need systems, we need clarity on how we're going to all work together to actually achieve that strategy we wrote down, the execution plan we want to have happen. And so my journey really began at that point where we're 100 people, everybody's so keen, and we just want to grow. But we're trying to figure out how to grow. And so from that point on, working with my own coach, the rest of my leaders, we decided we should just build a rhythm, a system that we could actually, put in place quarter over quarter as we're trying to figure this out. And so my first company, which was Paradata Systems, we built the Metronomics system, and that's over 25 years ago, and putting it in place and getting the rhythms we needed, the systems we needed. Any company, the system exists, right? The people systems and the business systems, we have to get them in place. But it took us a lot to discover them and to really figure out how do we get this cranking so we can take the opportunity in the marketplace that was presented to us and grow not only the company, but grow ourselves. So that was my first business. We exited to a US company. I was with that company for 3 years. They took the system that we created and we backed it into that company. And why I say backed it in is because that company was already going. So 100 people, then we go, they had 300 people, now we're 400 people. And we took the opportunity that the CEO and the leaders are really keen that we put this system into their organization. And so That was probably my first time really implementing it. Yes, I was an executive in that company, but, coaching the CEO and putting it into the business and, getting it cranking in that business. 400 people, it took us, 8 good quarters to get it fully rolled out. And then when I think of 12 quarters, it was like dialed, really dialed. I actually
Wow.
stepped away from that organization. At that point, I went and created a second company, which was compliance. Nothing worse than watching paint dry is compliance. But it was the opportunity to grow a business and to grow another business where, again, the market need was great. We got to take orphan technology, this post-trade compliance for broker dealers. Like, that's a mouthful. And quite frankly, I wasn't really even sure what that meant when the orphan software was offered. And the great news about that story and that organization and the team, we started February 2008. We opened the doors with a full ready to implement the metronomic system. We not only had mapped out everywhere we wanted to go from 10 years, 3 years, 1 year, that quarter. When we opened the door, we'd done all the strategic work. And we did it quite quickly because the system allows us to do it quickly. And then we got in there, got the company going to validate. And just to finish off that piece, because it's a bit of a long story, but it's really important piece of the story is we started the business with Metronomics, with the system that we built in our first business that the company who acquired my business used. And we started, out the second company that I had the pleasure of being the CEO of, and we started with Metronomics. We built it over 12 quarters. We actually took term sheets on our 3-HAG quarter, and the term sheets were fantastic and something we couldn't ignore. And we exited that business in the next quarter. This time I went to a public company. It was a $3 billion company, a 1,000-person, division we got integrated into. And they, again, adopted the system, adopted the metronomic system for their organization because they, joined the transaction that took place. The more they dug into due diligence, in our company and what we were doing and how we were doing it, they'd never seen a company so young operate in such a mature way. And it actually increased the value of our transaction, which is the opposite of what happens once you go into due diligence.
Yeah.
And so that exit was, one of the top 3 on Wall Street that year for mid-market companies. And, the greatest, a lot of people were like, I can't believe you went to the other side of that transaction. Well, I did go to the other side of that transaction, and there was a really great experience. Each one of those were great experiences in putting the system into another organization, understanding how it works, and the lessons that you learn, right? As, we can always learn at every stage.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter if you're a big company or a small company, you can use the system. Like, that's the best news ever.
Yeah.
Shannon, it's an amazing story. I've heard it, parts of it before, but actually this was some new details for me. So
Yeah,
thanks
me
for
too.
sharing it.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
sure.
So the first question I want to ask Shannon, there's so many, and I know we're going to have a great conversation. We ask all our guests this. And you're familiar that John and I, as well as a couple of our coach colleagues a few years ago, we interviewed 72 CEOs across the globe. And based on the findings of those interviews and the survey we did analysis on it. And then we wrote a white paper called the CEO Playbook. And one of the concepts that came out of the analysis that really was kind of surprising to us. We didn't expect this going in, but we really found this correlation of what we call the CEO doom loop. And it really, the more we talked about it and the more we've talked with other CEOs and looked at those interviews, it's a real thing. And even John and I, from our own experiences as CEOs. So question for you, Shannon, as a CEO, have you ever experienced the CEO doom loop yourself?
Hey, absolutely. I don't know any CEO that wouldn't say that. Like,
Right.
It's nice we get the outcomes, but like, oh my gosh, like what we grow through as a CEO, it's really interesting. Like, I was actually telling a story yesterday. At 26, 27 years old, you put the CEO hat on, you're wearing a few other hats, but you put the CEO hat on, there are some pretty dark days at night at that
Right.
point where you're trying to figure out, number one, do I really want to do this? Number two, okay, now I'm doing it. How am I going to get there? Right? Three, who's going to help me? Right? Four, and then am I doing it? Like, are we actually doing it, or are we just spinning our wheels? And when I think about even on the sort of what I could call the eve of Metronomics being born, you're in that place. You're in that doom loop. And I think of as a CEO, there's a couple different layers of it, because there's yourself, and then you can't even share with too many people that where you are, because your team will follow that, and so on. And so, one of the great things on the eve of Metronomics is probably one of the things I did do right, just because maybe I'm so young, thinking about this simplistic, the simple thing is to go get a coach, right? The coach didn't have the system or whatnot, but the coach was the thing that helped me avoid many doom loops. And I was definitely, even before the eve of Metronomics, I was definitely, living these doom loops, trying to figure out like where am I, and am I going to be the one to take us to the next level? And as we know, we're all coaches. We've all been CEOs. We've had coaches. We've had coaches for athletics. We've had coaches for ourselves personally, for our businesses, for our teams. Like that's the awareness level. It's probably, again, one of those things you did right, is to go get a coach, because they're sitting on your shoulder. They're your awareness. They actually tell you where you are and actually get you out of it. And when I think of the eve of Metronomics, it was that discussion with my coach, because I asked him over and over again, no matter where we were in our cycle. The first 3 years were nutty in our business, I'm not going to lie. Anyone you talk to there. But for me personally, it's like, well, we don't want this chaos to carry on. And it's the coach that's going to help us, help you actually see where you are to get you out of it. Right? It was really, really key. Really key. And I think, like, even with a coach, we can fall back there, but a coach is going to help not let us fall too far into that doom loop. Right. So, and I know we're all coaches today, but we're all coaches today because we were all CEOs. Because we're all CEOs and we had that support, we want to give it back, to bring it full circle.
Yeah, that's exactly right. That's why I'm a
John
coach.
And I talked about this before.
My coach said to me, you should think about being a coach. And I'm like, this is unbelievable. I mean, it's because it's lonely as hell. I mean, it is a hard job. So, super rewarding.
So as a CEO, I did not have a coach. So I paid plenty of money to an EOS implementer, but it's not the same thing. I didn't have anybody to call. So, Shannon, I know you say you were a frustrated CEO. I say I was a frustrated and lonely CEO. And that was, I just couldn't get out of my own head. And I was just spinning in the doom loop in my own head. And I wish I had had a coach. And for me, what powers me as a coach is that I want to be the coach that I wish I had that could have helped Glen as a CEO.
Yeah. And it's funny about, like, my coach, one of the greatest gifts they gave me was growing me into a coach when I was a CEO and being really clear that's what they were doing. And then, working with me to help grow my leaders into coaches so that they could grow their leaders into coaches. And we know that's the coach cascade system in Metronomics, but for anyone listening in, any CEO listening in, like, getting our heads and our awareness and, like, really changing the dialogue. That was the big thing, is stop answering questions and, create the expectation and the outcome with your team that you want. And then we're asking questions, right? That's the three of us today do all day long, is ask questions as coaches. But I want to grow, today, my give back is to grow that CEO into a coach and have their leaders grow into coaches and so on, because it's the only way to unlock their own growth, not only of themselves, but of their organization.
Yeah, absolutely.
Good stuff. Let me ask you a question about kind of vision. So you started a couple of these companies, sold both of them. Were these pre-revenue when you got into the CEO's seat, or what did that look like for you?
Yeah. Both of them
Really?
Zero revenue. Yeah. Yeah. Zero. Starting from zero.
So, I mean, so that's a pretty remarkable track record to be able to take two pre-revenue companies and take on the market and sell those. So I think one of my questions for you, and I know that I hear this from CEOs, is that your pre-revenue, like you think that there's a market out there, you think there's a market opportunity, but you're also almost like
Yeah.
evangelizing, right? I have a solution
Yeah.
or a product or a service going to fit that need. So can you talk a little bit about when you're at that pre-revenue stage, you think you've got a great idea and how that kind of tied into your short-term vision and then your long-term vision, what you were doing with both those opportunities?
It puts a big smile on my face because the first company was very different than the second company. Big pre-revenue. Pre-revenue in the first company, you have the greatest solution. You have, the slickest solution. We had something like, I don't know, 7 patents on this solution. Like it was the most beautiful baby, right? And you're like, everybody's going to want my baby, right? Everyone's going to want that. Yay, everyone's going to want it. And, the very first thing we created in my first company, we loved it. It was a technical feat. The patents were amazing. Everyone should have loved our baby. But, we just didn't know the market well enough to fit it in, our baby into the market. We worked really hard to fit it into the market. And, some of the things we know in the metronomic strategy system came from working the steps out in the order we need when we're going and I love the way you said it, John, evangelizing, something new. We're always on the very bleeding edge of technology. And, maybe you know this or you don't know this about my first company, but the very first product in my first company that we were trying to generate revenue from was a way that we would lock up satellite images. And these images, to the point that before we showed up, an organization would spend, 6 figures plus on this CD library of satellite images. And as a way, then they, we got in there at CDs. And so our original product locked each and every tile up on these CDs, right? And then you could give the libraries out, and then people could buy on demand which tiles they needed for their work.
Okay.
It was, and it's satellite imagery.
Wow.
So think about satellite imagery. Yeah. We had to come up with a payment system. So we would give them, people actually would call our office and they'd give us, their key, and they'd buy the key and we'd give them back a key, and they would open the tile on that CD. Crazy. Then it went to DVDs and then it went to the web. It went pretty fast, right? It's late 90s. But the thing that we needed was payments, right? So e-com was the greatest thing, and everybody was talking about e-com. And if you're not doing e-commerce, and so we were like, we can easily get that technology. We'll just, put that into the flow. It'll be so simple. And in the meantime, we'll just have people call us. They'll give us their credit card. We'll punch it into the machine on the desk. I mean, think about this. This is so funny. Plug it into the machine on the desk, and then we'll, run the transaction and we'll give it back. And so what we were trying to do is automate the whole thing. We wanted to be very passive, that all these CDs, DVDs would go out with all this, bajillion-dollar databases on it of data. It didn't have to be satellite images, could have been anything. And we could protect it, and they could call us to get a key, but we didn't want them to call us. We just wanted them to put their information in, get the key, buy the keys to unlock it. Well, we weren't able to integrate any solution that made sense. It was all just smoke and mirrors e-commerce at that time. So then we were like developers for sure at that time. We were like, okay. I was like, we definitely don't want to build this ourselves. This is crazy. This is not our business. Let's find a toolkit. So we went and found a toolkit that IBM had and HP had, because they had all the big sort of payment processing gateways at the banks worldwide. So we went and got their kit. We actually get their kit up and running with our technology And then we start running transactions. Well, little did we know that we were the first ones in the world to do it by ourselves. Like to actually go get the kit, connect it up, Royal Bank of Canada. We connected to banks in the US. We banked to other banks in Canada. And like we were doing the first transactions ever. And so like this is our pre-revenue. And then of course, what does that attract? HP, IBM, all the banks to us. And they're like, who are you guys? What are you doing? What do you do? And we're like, oh, we unlock satellite imagery over here. We had this great locking mechanism for pirating digital, files. And they're like, oh, that's really nice. But how'd you figure out the payment side of this? And we just said, we followed the instructions in your toolkit. We sent out both IBM and HP. So we went to all the banks and they, obviously the banks and HP and IBM came back to us and were like, do you want to just like process payments, e-commerce payments for everyone? That was like, yeah. And so that's how we went from pre-revenue to being a very fast growing, company because we, in the beginning, were taking a percentage of the total amount of dollars we process across our platform. We took a percentage of it. That's how it started.
That's fascinating. So if you think about kind of that success, that kind of bootstrapping, scrambling, which I can relate to, how much of the credit with that do you give to you got lucky, 2 is you're innovative and you saw the market opportunity, or 3rd is your ability to like make quick adjustments, right? So when things were happening and you couldn't find what you needed to, you got to adjust at that point because maybe the market isn't what you thought it was. When you think about kind of your success with that first company, what do you think are the reasons you were successful?
Think of the first company and we were like reading all the books. You think of it, the coach has got us reading all the books and so we had our core purpose down, we had our core values down. So everything was aligning. We knew where we wanted to go, all these things. But if we think of our 10 to 30 year goal, our 10 to 30 year goal was to really, protect digital files and be the system to unlock them globally, whether it was in the cloud, whether it was on hard technology and whatnot. And what got shifted was that was all good. We sold that part of the business to a company out of the US who definitely leveraged it to prevent piracy of software. Microsoft loved our technology. It was all patented and dialed. It was so good. It was really good technology. But the payments industry was just here and now. It was we was okay, we had a team dealing with this over here and we actually sold it off. And then we could absolutely focus. We had to pivot and focus on the payment industry. And we had to we followed our own process, got to know the market map, got to know the value chain, got to figure out who the customer is and, all of it really fast. But when you've got HP, IBM, and the banks around the world calling you, it's you better figure it out really fast. So we figured that out very fast from a strategic perspective. And then we're a really small team. We're 4 people. I'm not kidding. 4 people in a garage in Function Junction in Whistler, British Columbia. Right? And we had, built a payment server that sat on our desk, It actually printed the transactions because we thought that was really safe because the cloud wasn't that great, all these things. And the internet, our original office was in another town south of Whistler. We moved it up to Whistler because of the infrastructure that was getting put in place because Whistler was a bigger resort. All these crazy things actually to get it there. But the mindset of what we did there was very it was reactionary, right? It was here's an opportunity, then let's go research the opportunity. Let's create a strategy. Let's go, right? So that was one side of it. When I think about my second company, where I said it was very different, I was in a CEO roundtable for many years. I was exiting, my first go at building a company and then going to the other side with the team there. And I decided to leave. It was time and my contract was up. And at that time, I was offered 2 opportunities. One was to be a CEO of another company that was, nice, large company and go drive that to the next level. And the other was they had, the same person who was in my roundtable had technology that was orphaned for the broker-dealer compliance space. And I was like, he offered me both. I was like, nah, I don't want to do that. It's like, so no, and now I think I'm just going to take a break. But, another CEO in my roundtable was like from that space, couldn't believe that the other CEO offered me this technology. And they were like, he was like, we need to do this.
Okay.
I don't know. I don't want to do compliance, nah. And then, so he literally called me twice a day for probably 60 days. Okay. Dog with a bone. Like that was my partner. He's my co-founding partner at Subservio. He called me. I kept going, nah, I don't want to. Nah, I don't want to. I finally said, all right, I'll look at it. So I looked at it and I just couldn't believe that compliance, like post-trade automated compliance, wasn't a thing in 2008. It was actually 2007. I couldn't believe it. Like, that's ridiculous. Really? Like, really? Like the whole broker-dealer markets, like doing compliance on paper, like with thumb, rubber thumb things. I was like, really? Well, that's, what happened in 2008.
There's an image, but yeah.
So
Yeah.
That was the point. And so then I looked at it. I was like, okay, that's cool. Then I went out and he's like, we can call some chief compliance officers at some broker dealers and we can show it to them, right? Because the technology was orphaned. It was sort of worked, didn't really work, but we could show it to them. And everybody we showed that to was like, when can we have this? And I was like, that's interesting. Nice. Okay. Then from that point, I went away and he and I spent a lot of time building out the strategy for that, opening the door. So that when we open the door, we're hitting revenue that month. And we were not we weren't going to venture back it. We didn't even back it. I just wanted to open the door and have people buy the solution that month.
Wow.
And so we spent, we spent December, January figuring out the strategy, talking to the marketplace. My partner's so well connected in the broker-dealer marketplace that we actually called many people. They wanted to buy it in the call, right? And we originally had the business model set that it would be, it's a SaaS platform. No other platform existed in that marketplace as a SaaS platform. There's nothing for small to medium-sized broker-dealers. It's 80% of the market. Like, everything lined up. And then we did the business model. I remember one of the calls we did the business model, figuring out, okay, how many users do we have to bring on? How do we, I think of my widgets, right? How many users, how many broker dealers, right? Lining it up. And the most interesting thing is that we had the model. We would ask each broker dealer, well, what would you invest in something like this on a monthly basis? And they all came back at we'd invest anywhere from $750 US per user per month. And I was like, I never, they didn't see the surprise on my face, but I typed that into my spreadsheet and it blows my spreadsheet up. Right?
Wow.
You know how you get too many zeros in your spreadsheet and you can't read the numbers anymore?
Yeah, you get all the hash marks.
Holy balls. I was like, wow, okay. My partner is texting me going, holy because we had it at $40 per month per user and they're coming in at $750. So that was I'm in, let's go, we're going to make this happen. And so when we opened the doors in February 2008, we would only allow, everybody wanted it. Think about 2008. It wasn't quite, the markets hadn't quite blown yet in 2008. It was later that year, we were wondering why we started a business in 2008. Because we're like, this is the craziest market ever.
Sure.
But, in a down market, everybody wants compliance. And so we customer funded that business. That's the difference.
Wow.
We went very quickly from no revenue to lots of revenue and recurring revenue.
That's crazy.
And our first year, it was we hit what we said we would do. And we're getting the customers to fund us. That's why we raised no money. We did not use credit cards to fund the business. We took And we didn't take any initial capital.
So you were cash
Not
flow,
even our
you're cash
own.
flow positive at
Yes.
the get-go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's hard
Yeah.
to
And
do.
one of the, I just didn't want to, I came from being venture backed from day 2 in my first business. Like we were venture backed.
Mhm.
I was like, I went like, if we can avoid that this time around, let's try. Like, let's make it,
Yeah.
let's figure out the business model so that it works. And the business model, greatly enough, we stole from Salesforce. Our first business was SaaS. It was a monthly. Our second was, yes, it was SaaS. But if you're going to pay monthly, you're going to pay a lot more. So go ahead, pay monthly. But if you want to fund us, you want to be on our platform, pay annual. And so my partner actually said there's no way anyone's going to pay that annual. And it was like, it's over $100,000 plus they're paying for users on our platform for the size
Wow.
of their team. And they're using a credit card. Yeah, credit cards, right? Because we didn't care. We were like, yeah, we just want to take the money. And then we were giving them deals on 1 year, 2 year, 3 years paying up front. And,
Wow.
as the story goes, we hit our 3 hag is why we ended up, having so much interest in who we were. There's only two other companies in our space, and they were big elephants. One wanted us, and then there was another company, in the market map, in our strategic market map, that, we had the exact same customers, and they wanted what we had to take their business to the next level. So it was a really great learning experience and putting in the system, right? The metronomic system at, a really fast pace. And I know a lot of people think that you can't do this zero revenue. You can absolutely put the system in zero revenue.
Yeah.
And
That's what I was
frankly, I think it's easier
Yeah.
right,
Yeah.
to grow it from there.
That's a question I wanted to ask as you were talking, because I do hear that a lot. It's like, well, when you're a startup, you don't have time to worry about culture or strategic planning or any of that stuff.
Yeah.
It's all about product market fit, product market fit, product market fit. And, those stories you just told John and I, not the case.
No. And, we did the work on, and I, like, for anyone, I would recommend, before you bring any product to, spend any time on product, you got to do the fit first. So many young companies, and I'll raise my hand. I did it in my first company. We built the greatest, shiniest thing. And, we did have a market. It wasn't going to be as big as we thought, right? And we were able to shift. We did have the structure in place to be able to take, does this fit our core purpose? Is this who we are, in order to shift? And that's really important. Really important.
Can I ask one more question before we move on out of that?
Yeah.
Go ahead, John.
So, one of the reasons that I actually became a metronomics coach is about 6 years ago, I was looking for something that I could use as a coach that actually did strategy. There wasn't a ton of stuff out there. And what I found is most businesses don't have a strategy. So I stumbled across Shannon and met Shannon and have been a coach for whatever, spent 5.5 years now because of it. But when I listened to your story, Shannon, one of the things I kind of thought about is this whole kind of red ocean versus blue ocean kind of strategy thing, right? And the question I wanted to ask you as it relates to metronomics and the strategy system, the blue ocean concept, which is, I think, what you were doing with both of your startups, right? So markets that weren't mature, you're kind of creating a market, evangelizing that market is different than red ocean. And it's interesting. I think there's tons of opportunity to be really successful in red ocean today.
Yep.
Right? I think there's opportunities in both of those. But from a strategy perspective, you look at the metronomic strategy system, how do you think it plays in both the blue ocean, unproven market versus the red ocean where it's a mature market?
That's such a good question. It's such a good question because, I think about the companies that we coach today. Some are blue ocean and some might have some products that are going blue ocean and some are red ocean. And I think the thing that has always, I think about even getting, bought into these other companies who were not blue ocean. There's some things they were moving there, but were solid red. And then applying the metronomic strategy system to it. Because regardless of where you are, you're going to map that market so that, are you Are you in a market that is, not on the bleeding edge and whatnot, or are you on the edge of that market going over to the other side? But the steps that we take, and it was really interesting for some of the first companies I coached. A lot of the CEOs came to me, and they were tech CEOs in some way, hardware, software. They knew of me in the Vancouver market, and they reached out. They're like, we haven't seen anyone grow and sell two businesses 6 years apart. You must have a system, right? So that's what they said. I was like, fair enough. And so in the beginning, we were using the same strategy system for their markets. Some of like mature technology, other was, brand new bleeding edge technology. But then as the next company's called for a coach, they were like a construction company. They were what's another one? Exporting hay. And they've done it for 56 years, right? So it's the same process regardless. It's a matter of how wide you're looking at your market and looking at where you want to end up, and then just finding the path there, finding the opportunities, and you must know the market you're playing in. So red ocean, blue ocean doesn't matter. You just have to know, you have to have market expertise in those markets, no matter where you're playing.
Okay.
Right? That's why I think it works regardless. And I think about my companies today. There are some that are definitely on the bleeding edge, but I think about the maturity of the companies and where they're playing. We're doing some things that are, bleeding edge because we want to take opportunity of white space we see in their markets today. Right. And I think it always comes back to making sure we are market experts and, both coach and leadership team in the markets, right, that we are looking to grow in. So I just think, following the system, the strategy system, I always say it's paint by numbers, right? Just step by step by step. And in the beginning, you're more worried about the process. Are we getting it right? Than, sometimes what's in the strategy. But go again. You should never stop doing it. I couldn't even tell you how many times I've done it in the last 30 years, going around the strategy system wheel and then, getting us, whether it's my teams or my clients' teams, just to know their market. And John, you said it. Most organizations are not confident in their strategy. Doesn't matter, red ocean, blue ocean. Mostly because they're not experts in their market. And so they don't know that, do we tweak this or do we tweak that? Because they don't know.
Yes. I mean, it's a fascinating exercise when we start to do the attribution framework and ask our clients to start to understand their competitors on the attributes that the market competes. They don't know. Like, I haven't had anybody that said, we got it all dialed in. Here's what it is. Like they're just kind of operating in a vacuum almost and not going out and looking at what's going on in the market. What should we be doing? It's really fascinating.
Yeah, the market.
Yeah.
And their competitors. Really, the competitive knowledge just really isn't there.
No. Yeah. Right.
It amazes me because I was, I think coming into being, sort of coming from founder tech, really young, not knowing like all this stuff. Like, I don't know, maybe I just doubled down and I didn't do it with AI. Today, we can get so much further faster leveraging the prompts we're asking AI to learn about our competitors and the marketplaces out there. Like, we're doing it, old school.
Yeah.
Old school hard, and just living it, one by one. You got to learn about this and the next one and the next one and never stopping.
Yeah.
Right? Knowing the market.
Yeah. Shannon, a question I wanted to ask you is so we talked about Paradata and Subservio. And can you share with us a time, I'm sure it happened, I know it happens to all of us, but where the company's growth, because you talked about you had some phenomenal growth, but where you felt as CEO that the company was outgrowing your talent, your ability as a CEO, and what did you do about that?
Yeah, so many a times that happens. And I think the first times in Paradata when it happened, we didn't have the full, what we know now as the human system in place. It was being developed. And we didn't have it all in place. The later years of Paradata and into Subservio, we had it right off the start. And why I say that's important is if we are going, not, number one, we have our best intentions to grow, the team we had with us today into the next step, the next step, the next step. We want people to be growing, with us. But it's not always the case. The company could outgrow. They may not be able to get there in time. And I can think of one situation that got handled actually quite well because we had the system in place. We were really clear on the functional scorecard, what was expected of the person who owned that function. And we had a controller in that function who wanted to grow into that director of finance, a chief financial officer. And we had on their growth plan to get them there. Well, we just grew too fast. And the pressure that we had on us to get, someone in who already had the experience was, right in front of us. And we had that scorecard and we had the controller trying to grow into that scorecard. But why that went well is the awareness of the person who was in that role, according to the scorecard they had today and the scorecard they wanted to grow into. They were as aware as we were that they weren't at the mark they needed to be by the time we needed that, scorecard filled. And so instead of it being a huge, I'm out, I can't believe you didn't give me that role. And we actually lose that person because we go, oh, we're just going to put them in anyway, right? We didn't do that. We said, you know what? We had a great discussion with the person we wanted to grow into that role. They acknowledged they weren't ready. And all they asked is, could they be a part of hiring their new coach, right? Because they were going to get hired over.
Okay.
Could they be a part of, that whole process so that they could get the right person that now would have a CFO growing them up into their next role. They still wanted to be a CFO. And in this particular story, we brought in a CFO. They coached that controller up. There was no growth position in our organization for them at that time. And we actually helped them find a role in another organization as a CFO, right? And they went off and, were a CFO in another role. We had it set up so we could backfill, the succession has to be there in order to do that. And that's a great outcome. And the human system, when we put it in place, when we have regular 90-day coaching reviews, aligned to a scorecard, aligned to performance, aligned to core values, and we're having these regular conversations and we know where they want to grow to, it just really cleans it up. When we don't have all that and we get, which in my first business, I didn't have all that in place, we knew we needed to hire up over. I hate to say that. No one wants to be hired over, but we needed to do it. It didn't turn out as well. And so school hard knocks learning that way to just putting in place the things we know that as, what I wanted a coaching review, I wanted clarity of a scorecard and I wanted to know where the next place I could grow to was. And then I wanted someone to help get me there. So that's what we wanted to set up. And it really works, right? I know both of you have had those experiences with your clients and within your own businesses. It really works. And when we don't do it that way, we're not doing great by our team members. Number one, not offering them a place to grow to, not being clear with them, bringing the awareness. And the one thing I love most about, the coaching reviews that happen every 90 days is the awareness level of all team members rise and the expectations of what they're to do together rise. And it really brings us to another level of understanding. And as humans, we want that next thing, but being realistic and factual, whether they're ready or not.
Yeah. Well, Shannon, you always say this and totally agree, that A players want feedback. And I shared an example before we started recording this of one of my client companies and the CEO, who is an A-player CEO, Shannon, you know him.
Yes.
And we today I was able to facilitate with his board of directors a mutual scorecard review between the CEO and the board of directors, which had never happened before. And the CEO had been really begging for this. He wanted to know how could he be a better CEO and get that feedback. And we had the discussion. There was a lot of nervousness around it. I had calls with all parties beforehand. But at the end of it, it was just, I asked, well, how was that? And they're like, this is great. We cleared the air. We left nothing, everything's on the table. There's nothing hidden. And we had good action items on, hey, here's where we had a gap. Here's what you can do. And it was very positive. We sound the action items, www. And then I asked a question. I said, so how do you think the next one's going to go? And everybody answered, oh, I think it'll go much faster. This was great, right? That quarterly
Yeah.
cadence.
Yes. And, I know that I can't even think way back. I guess it was my dislike of an annual review. Like, it was why we ended up with quarterly reviews in our system is because, like, the annual review would be, everyone dreaded them. Everyone had to do them. It took hours upon hours, at the end of your fiscal year that you need to be spending time elsewhere and nobody wants to do it. It's all this negative thing where when we think about, the feedback loop, we need it daily, we need it weekly, we need it monthly,
Yeah.
we need it quarterly. Like, we're human beings. We need feedback.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So I've got 90 day and a lot of people go every 90 days. They're thinking they're 2-hour reviews every 90 days,
Right.
but we know it's
Right.
not. We get better
Yeah.
at the system. The metronome software helps make it faster, easier, clearer.
Yeah.
Right. And
Yeah.
we get better and better and better. And so, you can really get those reviews down to 30 minutes. You can get your weeklies down to 15 because they're coaching.
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah.
So Shannon, next question I had is, so you've run a couple companies, you were a really successful CEO. I know you were retired and then started coaching again, right? And coaching
Still retired.
and coaching. Yeah, you're not retired.
Ah,
coaching
love
some
that. I
clients
love that.
kind of on
Right.
the side. And now Glenn and I
Yeah.
can tell all of our listeners that you work harder than most people I know. The amount of effort and time you put into this is unbelievable. So you don't have to do this.
Yeah.
So why are you a coach and why have you decided that you're so passionate about the metronomic system and building a coaching community and all the things that you're doing? Because you don't need to.
Well, yeah, no, I mean, I truly, truly am retired. And how I define retirement is doing what you love and
Yeah.
really serving your personal purpose. And my personal purpose is to ensure, like, I don't want anyone as desperate as I was to figure out how to grow a company. Right? It's why it gets me up every day. And not only that, the thing that really changed my world was, having a coach and asking my coach for their system. They were a 4-time exited, CEO, sort of the granddaddy of tech in Canada. And I was so grateful to work with John Kelly that, it's like, can't we just use your system? Let's use your system. Right. And he
Mhm.
wasn't able to explain his system. And he's like, Shannon, you're doing all the things that you should be doing. I go, well, why does this feel like a hole? Like, when you're that young, you're like going, like, really? Like, it's a hole. Like, 80-hour weeks. Like, how do you get life balance? How do you like, everybody's doing
Yeah.
it this way? That's terrible. So I didn't want anyone else to have to do it that way. And so it was the CEO that called me and, I was home. I had retired and called me. I was like, we watched you do this. You must have a system. We want the system. Can you come and help us implement the system that you used? Because, we've been slogging here for 15 years. 15 years. And you come in, you build one, then you go off, do 3 years at the company, you come back, you build another. Like, what? Like, why aren't you sharing it? And so that really resonated with me because I asked my own coach to share his system. And it's a tough thing to get the system over your head. I even said to that CEO, I said, I have no idea if this system will work for you because I was involved in the day-to-day of those 4 companies I put the system into.
Mm.
I'm not the CEO.
Mhm.
You're the CEO. So, and setting it up. But he was so, desperate to get some light at the end of the tunnel, some fun back in his world and take what he's built for 15 years and get the value that I was like, he was like, sort of like, yeah, come on, we'll figure it out. So I love that. We knew there was a system there, but could I explain it? And both of you know how hard it is to get it out of, the head.
Yeah.
And there's so many, nuances and things that, behavioral things that, we have learned along the way, and I've learned a lot. So that's why I get up every day to do this. I still have 6 companies I work directly with. In the journey of all of this, it was the books were written not for people to call me. It was to, they were written as recipe books. So people would take it and go and use it. Because when I got to 6 clients, I was like, that's enough. That's enough. Now what do I do? I still had people calling. So it's just like, I'm going to write it down, so naive. So naive. It's just, it's actually comical. I'm going to write it down and I'm going to write a book and I'm going to put it out there. And now everyone can use it, right? They won't need to call, but they did. Everyone kept calling.
More.
Yeah, they called more. And then like the 3-hag side of it, right? I mean, that's the other piece. So everyone knows I like one piece of paper and I like pictures and I don't like to write anything. Like I don't want to write anything. I want to draw it. So to write a book was a huge feat for me. There's no doubt. And I was like, yep, got my book written. That's it. Not writing another one. Until like some coaches started asking for the 3-hag, the strategy system.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, sure, you can use it because I had talked about it. Sure. I didn't write about it the first book because I used a different system to, pay homage to Vern who wrote the forward. So I was like, oh yeah, no, sure. And, I gave them everything, and then they got incredible results. So much so that, these CEOs are up on the stage sharing the results and giving kudos back to the 3-hag, which I fell out of my chair that day. I had no idea who these people were, which was so cool. Right. And then that's why I wrote down the 3-hag. And the 3-hag again was to give it back because everybody after that conference, there's like 1,200 people, 1,200 CEOs and leaders in the room. And you have someone on stage talking about a 3-hag and now everybody wants it. And I don't have it in any way, shape or form to share it. So, but it was the thing that unlocked everything. Now that you sit down and write it down, pretty amazing. The other piece to that is that's what attracted coaches actually to me and why I get up every day again to support coaches is because that's the one to many. That's the exponential impact. If we have many coaches who understand not only the strategy system, but the system, oh my gosh, we can help so many people find balance in their lives and have fun again at work and not thinking they're chained to the company they started, right? So it's so each and every step along the way, especially since 2018, and just, I guess saying it out loud, going, this is what I'm going to do every day. This is my seniors golf tour. Like my husband's playing his seniors golf tour. I'm playing my seniors golf tour. And it's sponsored by Metronomics.
That's funny.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. And we probably should have you mentioned this in your introduction, Shannon. Your first book was The Metronome Effect, right? Then 3-hag Way.
Yes.
And I remember when I met you in May of 2018, I had gone to train with the Gravitas organization.
Yes.
And I walked in to the happy hour before then the national conference, and there you were sitting there with the books. And you were the first person to introduce yourself to me. And you said, do you want a book? And you described and gave me 2 books. And I said, how much do I owe you? And you said, no, they're free. And I'm like, I love this place. I get free books and these people are so nice. And then you spoke, I believe it was the next day or maybe the second day that you spoke on, because you had just released the 3-hag Way. And that was, I think, when you debuted the Metronome software, right?
Yeah.
That was kind of the debut at that conference. That was in New Orleans. And I was just, I was blown away. This is so cool because you guys both know the story, but when I was a CEO, where I really, really got stuck, I was running a publicly traded company, was on strategy. And I really didn't understand what strategy was or the definition of strategy. And to start hearing this and hearing it unlocked is like, I've got to do this. And I've got to share this with other companies, other CEOs.
Yeah. You couldn't even make this up if you tried. You couldn't even go, I hope I write 4 books. Like no one would ever say that. I definitely wouldn't.
Yeah.
But it was the purpose, passion for the purpose that got me to write those books. And like 3-hag Way, like that is the thing for coaches and CEOs and teams, because if you're not confident in your strategy, you cannot make better, faster decisions. If you can't make better, faster decisions on the direction you're going, you're not going to get there. So that was just like such a great thing that coaches took it, used it, got the same results I got. Because one of the biggest things that I was getting, pushback on from coaches actually was that how could I spend so little time with clients and get the results we were getting? And it's a system, right? It was a system. It's a system that I'm using, the system they're using, the common language we have, right? The cadence, the ability to see in the game through the software platform anytime you wanted to see it of your teams you're coaching, like really interesting. And then I know you guys know this, like Metronomics, the big fat Metronomics book, that's like a really hard recipe book to read. It was written as a playbook to write it all down, and that was the request of coaches who joined us in our three-hat community, which is now the Metronomics community. Someone goes, you wrote it all down? Like you didn't leave anything out? So they had to call you? And I'm like, no, why would we? Why would we leave it out? Because it's really hard to write it all down. That was the hardest thing ever to do.
Oh, I bet. That's huge.
And John, I know you had one more question you want to ask Shannon about leadership, right?
Go for it.
Which is our kind of latest hot favorite topic.
It is. So our question, and we were at Jim Collins a couple of weeks ago. So as we think about leadership, do you think, and this is a little off topic, but when you think about leadership, do you think leadership is a skill that can be learned? Or do you think leadership is something that is innate in you or formed at an early age?
So I've been asked that question many, many times. And my gut answer is you're born with certain traits. Some of those traits get enhanced as you grow, and opportunities actually bring out the leaders in people. So most people end up being leader. I think most people surprise themselves when they end up in leadership roles. Were they born a leader? Yeah, most people, I'm going to say all people are born a leader. It really depends on the opportunity, their purpose, their passion for what they want to do, and whether they're going to rise to the occasion. And I have one CEO that I've coached over the last 3 years. Really interesting, right? Definitely a leader, but whether, was going to be able to grow with the growth of their organization. There's such a great story I wasn't sure if they were going to actually be able to take the step. I now know everyone can take the step if they want to. Everyone can become a leader if they want to. And we know Metronomics is the willingness and the desire to evolve.
Yeah.
And I would say, when I think about, being born a leader, you're not born a leader, you're grown into a leader. And if you really want it, you'll make it. If you don't, that's fine. You don't have to, right? But I've seen, I think I could probably come up with 5 different examples of the least likely leaders. And if you look back in the past, no. And then there's something got them. They're like, we're doing this. And they figure it out. And I think mostly, and it's really odd, I'm going to say this, but a lot of those examples come from thinking about, male to female. And a lot of males are sort of, grown up, and it's just our unconscious bias that, yeah, of course. And they lean in. I think of women. I think of people who have moved their whole families across the world, and they join us, right, in Canada. And then they have this deep passion. That's the thing. Everyone can be passionate about something. If you are, and you want to do something about it, you will grow it yourself into a leader.
Good answer.
All
I like
right.
that one.
All right. Yeah. Thanks, Shannon. Appreciate that. It's good.
Yeah, you're
good
welcome.
viewpoint. All right. So here's a question we like to close every one of our podcasts with
Okay.
is Shannon, if you were collaborating with John and I and writing the CEO playbook, what are 3 things that you tell every growth stage CEO they should do no matter what?
3 things. Number 1, get a coach. I usually put
All
an
right.
F-bomb in there, right? That's number 1. Number 2, you got to have 100% A players on your leadership team. And number 3, you need to know where you want to end up 10 years from now and 3 years from now. Those are the 3
That's
things.
awesome. Yeah. I mean, it's,
Very well said.
yeah, simple, succinct. That's really key. Those 3 things for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, Shannon, we could probably talk all afternoon,
Yeah.
but I really
I
thank
love
you
it. It's
so
been really
much. And
fun.
yeah, it's
Really,
fun.
really fun.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank
John, you
you.
want to take us home?
Yeah, well, thanks,
Yeah,
Shannon,
thanks.
for spending the last hour or so with us. Glenn, thank you for your collaboration. To our listeners, I hope that you enjoyed the
Always.
opportunity to learn from Shannon, her vision around coaching, her vision around metronomics, and her experience. If this is interesting to you and you'd like to learn more about coaching, you can reach out to any of the three of us. And more than that, we'd love if you'd subscribe and like our content, because we're looking to grow a CEO community that's looking to learn together. So thank you, everybody, for your time.
Yeah. And of course, well, if you'd like to learn more about metronomics, read The M Game, Shannon's fourth and most recent book, talking about metronomics and some real world CEOs in there who share their stories of growth through metronomics. Thanks, Shannon.
Good stuff.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks to both of you.
Yeah.
Super fun.
Thanks, Shannon.
Have a great
Love it.
afternoon.
See you soon.
Take care.